Iran's deputy foreign minister stood in front of cameras this week and said 14 words that I want you to hold in your mind for this entire video. The plan we have presented is centered on ending the war. There are absolutely no details regarding the country's nuclear issues in this proposal. 14 words, 2 sentences, and buried inside them is the single clearest signal this conflict has produced in 70 days of war. Trump read Iran's proposal and posted on social media that he could not imagine it would be acceptable, that Iran had not yet paid a big enough price for what it has done to humanity and the world over the last 47 years. He later told reporters he studied it and it was not acceptable. So here is what just happened. Iran sent a 14-point document through Pakistan. The document contains a 30-day timeline to end the war, a demand that American forces withdraw from Iran's periphery, a call for the naval blockade to be lifted, a requirement that frozen Iranian assets be released, a demand for reparations, a call for sanctions removal, an end to fighting in Lebanon, and a new mechanism for managing the Strait of Hormuz. It contains 0 nuclear terms. None. The central issue America has been fighting over for 70 days is not in the document Iran submitted. Trump said it was not acceptable, and every press briefing covering this exchange described it as a setback in negotiations, a gap to be bridged, proposals and counterproposals, the normal vocabulary of diplomacy. I want to argue it is not a setback in negotiations. I want to argue that the exchange itself, Iran sending a 14-point proposal with no nuclear terms, and Trump saying it is not acceptable, reveals something more structurally significant than a gap. It reveals that both sides are not negotiating the same war. And when 2 sides are not negotiating the same war, the back and forth that looks like diplomacy from the outside is actually something else. It is both sides measuring the distance between their positions without either side being willing to close it. I call that a diagnosis. And the diagnosis tells you more about where this war ends than any individual proposal or rejection. Start with what Iran's sequencing actually means. Because the decision to submit a 14-point proposal with no nuclear terms is not an oversight. Iran's foreign ministry spokesman said it explicitly. At this stage, we do not have nuclear negotiations. Iran's position is a 3-phase structure. Phase 1 ends the war, lifts the blockade, and reopens the Strait of Hormuz within 30 days. Phase 2, which would begin after Phase 1 is complete, addresses the nuclear file, including a potential freeze on uranium enrichment for up to 15 years. Phase 3 addresses broader regional security. Iran is saying the nuclear question exists. Iran is saying it will discuss the nuclear question. Iran is saying it will not discuss the nuclear question until the war is over and the blockade is lifted. The logic behind that sequence is not irrational. Iran's argument is straightforward. If America can bomb Iran while nuclear talks are ongoing, then nuclear talks give America a target-rich diplomatic environment where Iran makes concessions under active military threat. Iran is not willing to negotiate its most important strategic asset while American ships are sitting outside its ports. It wants the military pressure removed before it discusses the thing the military pressure was designed to extract. That is a coherent position. It is also a position that America cannot accept. And understanding why America cannot accept it is the only way to understand why this exchange is a diagnosis rather than a negotiation. Here is America's structural problem with Iran's sequence. America started this war for one stated reason: the nuclear program. Stephen Miller, Trump's deputy chief of staff, said it directly. Trump has a red line to not allow Iran to develop nuclear weapons, and he will use force if necessary to accomplish that. Vance described the core goal as an affirmative commitment that Iran will not seek a nuclear weapon and will not seek the tools that would enable them to quickly achieve one. Rubio said it in every press briefing. The nuclear program is the reason America went to war. If America accepts Iran's sequence, end the war first, discuss the nuclear program second, America has agreed to remove its military leverage before extracting the one concession the war was supposed to produce. The blockade is lifted. The strikes are over. Iran is no longer under active military pressure, and now America is supposed to sit across from Iran and negotiate the nuclear question from a position of 0 coercive leverage. America would be in a weaker diplomatic position after 70 days of war than it was before the first strike on February 28th. That is not a deal. That is a documented defeat dressed in diplomatic language. So America cannot accept Iran's sequence, and Iran cannot offer America's sequence. Iran cannot commit to nuclear concessions before the blockade is lifted, because doing so means negotiating under military duress, which produces agreements Iran cannot domestically sustain or honor. Iran's own foreign ministry spokesman said it plainly. Iran fundamentally does not accept negotiations under ultimatums or imposed deadlines. Power on the battlefield and levers are the most important assurances for the implementation of any potential agreement. Translation: Iran will not agree to anything while a gun is pointed at it, because an agreement reached under that condition is not worth the paper it is signed on inside Iran's political system. Both positions are logical. Both positions are incompatible. And the incompatibility is not about numbers. It is not about whether the enrichment freeze lasts 12 years or 15 years. It is about the sequence. Who moves first? Who demonstrates trust before the other side demonstrates trust back? That is the diagnosis. Both sides are waiting for the other to go first on the thing that costs them most, and neither side will. Now, here is why Trump's specific language matters as much as Iran's proposal. Trump did not say the proposal was close but needed more work. He did not say the nuclear terms were missing and that Iran should add them. He said he could not imagine it would be acceptable because Iran had not paid a big enough price. And then he said Iran had done terrible things to humanity and the world over the last 47 years. That phrase, 47 years, is not a negotiating position. It is a frame. It places this war inside a historical account of grievance that predates the nuclear program, predates the Strait of Hormuz dispute, predates the proxies and the missiles and the sanctions. 47 years takes you back to 1979, to the Islamic Revolution, to the hostage crisis, to the fundamental rupture between America and Iran that no single document can resolve, regardless of how many points it contains. When a negotiator says the other side has not paid a big enough price, the negotiator is not describing a deal gap. The negotiator is describing a punishment threshold. And punishment thresholds are not bridged by proposals. They are satisfied by capitulation or extended by resistance. Iran has chosen resistance for 70 days. Trump is saying the resistance has not been costly enough to change his calculation. That is not two sides moving toward each other. That is two sides confirming their understanding of what this war is really about. Iran's parliament speaker Ghalibaf posted on social media in English that Operation Trust Me Bro failed. That is a man who sat across from Vance for 21 hours in Islamabad, came within 80% of a deal, and is now mocking the American position publicly in the language of internet slang. That is not the behavior of someone who believes a deal is close. That is the behavior of someone who has concluded the distance between the two positions cannot be closed under current conditions. Let me now explain the specific diagnostic value of the zero nuclear terms in Iran's proposal, because the absence is more informative than any of the 14 points that are present. Iran has approximately 440 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60%. A 90% enrichment threshold is required to produce a weapon. Iran is not there. But 60% is close enough to make the stockpile the single most important variable in the negotiation from America's perspective. Netanyahu and Trump have both said the stockpile must be removed from Iran entirely. Iran's foreign ministry has said the uranium will under no circumstances be transferred anywhere. That is a hard collision between two stated positions on the most consequential material question in the negotiation. Iran's proposal does not address the stockpile. It does not address the enrichment level. It does not address the centrifuges. It does not address the underground facilities that American B-2 bombers spent weeks trying to seal. Everything America went to war to stop, Iran's proposal places in a future phase that begins after the war is over and the blockade is lifted. The diagnostic reading of that absence is precise. Iran is telling America that the nuclear question is negotiable in principle, but not accessible under current conditions. The absence of nuclear terms in the proposal is not Iran refusing to discuss its nuclear program. It is Iran telling America that the price of accessing the nuclear conversation is ending the military confrontation first. Iran is not hiding the ball. Iran is telling America exactly what the ball costs and where it can be found. America's rejection of the proposal is also diagnostic. America is telling Iran that it will not pay that price, that the military confrontation is the only leverage America has over the nuclear question, and removing the military confrontation before securing the nuclear concession destroys the entire logic of the war. Both sides have now said clearly and precisely what they will not do. Iran will not put its nuclear program on the table while the blockade runs. America will not lift the blockade before the nuclear program is on the table. The proposal and rejection made both positions public, explicit, and documented. That is the diagnosis. Let me now name the two paths this diagnosis produces, because understanding them matters for what you watch in the days before the Beijing summit on May 14th. The first path is sequencing breakdown. The gap between Iran's position and America's position on sequencing does not close before Trump meets Xi in Beijing. No deal is reached, no framework is signed. The ceasefire continues as a managed confrontation, both sides firing and both sides calling it a ceasefire. Trump arrives in Beijing needing a win on trade. China has watched Iran's proposal land and America reject it. China uses the summit to position itself as the only actor with influence over both sides. America makes trade concessions to China in exchange for Chinese pressure on Iran that produces incremental movement, not a deal. The war continues through summer, with oil prices above $100 and American midterm elections in November creating domestic pressure to show progress on something. The second path is creative sequencing. Someone, most likely Pakistan, constructs a framework that lets both sides claim they moved first without either side actually moving first. The nuclear freeze is announced simultaneously with a blockade suspension. Iran calls it ending the war on its terms. America calls it securing the nuclear red line. The language is ambiguous enough that each government reads its own victory into the same document. This is the path that produced the 2015 nuclear deal, and it is the path that diplomacy finds when both sides are under enough pressure to need an exit. The difference between these two paths is not Iran's 14-point proposal. It is not Trump's rejection. It is what China tells Trump privately in Beijing about what Iran actually told Arakchi in the room in Beijing on May 6th. China heard Iran's terms before America rejected them publicly. China knows what Iran is actually willing to accept in Phase 2, if Phase 1 is structured correctly. If China shares that information with Trump in a way that lets Trump construct a sequencing proposal Iran will accept, a deal happens. If China uses that information as leverage over the summit agenda, rather than as input to the Iran negotiation, the managed confrontation extends. Watch one specific thing in the days before May 14th. Watch whether Iran's foreign ministry issues any statement that modifies the zero nuclear terms position. Not a reversal, any modification. Any language suggesting that Phase 1 and Phase 2 could be structured to begin simultaneously rather than sequentially. The proposal Iran submitted is 3 phases in sequence. If Iran signals any flexibility on the sequence, that is, Iran responding to whatever China told it in Beijing last week. If Iran's language hardens further, China told Iran something different. Iran sent 14 points and 0 nuclear terms. Trump said he cannot imagine it is acceptable. The press called it a negotiating gap. It is not a gap. It is both sides stating precisely and publicly where they stand and confirming that those positions do not currently overlap. That is the diagnosis. And the question the diagnosis raises is not whether a deal is possible. It is whether anyone in the room between now and May 14th has the information needed to construct the sequence that lets both sides get what they need without either side admitting they gave up what they said they would never give.